Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly look at the key board actions and what they mean for you, your family, and our community. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and joining me today is County Board Chair Matt DeFerranti and Board Vice Chair Katie Crystal. Matt and Katie, first, congratulations on being selected by your colleagues at the board's first organizational meeting of the year to lead the board in 2021.
Thank you, Kara. It's an honor and also a busy year already.
And of course, Matt, this is your first time as chair. And, we traditionally start off the new year at the County Board Wrap-Up with a look at your big priorities for the year. But I think we can all agree that the biggest priority for the year this year is going to be the COVID vaccine. So let's start off with that. And what is the current status of vaccinations in Arlington? What are we seeing from the population?
Sure. So we have, over the last week, had a transition from both the county and the Virginia Hospital Center providing vaccines to the state has shared with us a new direct to the county. We are receiving 2,750 vaccines this week, and we have heard that the state is going to receive a slightly larger amount next week. We're hoping to secure more doses of vaccine. The big picture is that there is huge demand in Arlington for doses, and there are not enough supply to reach everyone we want to reach as quickly as we want to reach them. We're working flat out to try and do that, but we also ask that there's a little bit of an understanding that Category 1B has way more demand for vaccines than we currently have supply in Arlington and Northern Virginia, and really the entire state is asking for more doses.
And of course, that expansion of the 1B category to include not only residents 75 and older, but also the 65 to 74 age bracket, and then 18 to 64 with underlying medical conditions. Those combined with the existing 1B employer brackets equals out to almost half of Virginia's population. So we're talking a lot of people in these brackets, correct?
We sure are. There's a large number of Arlington residents who had appointments we are working to reschedule, and that work is ongoing. We've pulled staff from across county government to try and address that need, and so we're trying to reschedule everyone over 75, and we're also working to get more doses to address those other groups that you mentioned in Category 1B. So there's a lot happening right now, and we understand such a need to do our best to reschedule as quickly as possible.
Let's actually talk a little bit more about that, because the public had a lot of confusion when they were learning that Virginia Hospital Center, because of this incredibly limited vaccine supply, had canceled many of its first dose appointments for the very end of January and then into February and beyond. Can we explain what led to some of those cancellations, and then how that affects the MOU that the board coincidentally was voting on a day or two after that announcement was made?
Sure. So there's a lot of understandable concern, but I want to reassure, and then we'll want Katie to offer her thoughts as well, of course, on this. But we want to reassure individuals so what happened is January 18th, the state changed the way that it distributed vaccines. And up until that point, people had been registering through the Virginia Hospital Center website, and it's a different system, and the county is going to be taking the lead. So we are working to call and email everyone who is over 75 who had signed up for an appointment. So we're working flat out on that. That's what led to it. It's an unfortunate circumstance of scheduling that the MOU that we agreed to was formalizing a partnership that we know has paid dividends in helping before January 18th and will pay dividends when we get more vaccines. But the county is really the lead for now. And as we speak, our staff is calling through a list of 3,000 to make sure that we're getting to everyone. So that's the MOU. That's the big picture context. Yet there's so much more to do in this process. So I don't know, Katie, if you have thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the confusion adds to the frustration. I think if I could put it in one simple way, it's this. In order to get vaccines into people's arms, as a locality, as a community, we need two things. We need the capacity, right? The trained individuals, the physical locations, the partnerships, and then we need vaccine supply. And for a while, actually, and is still the case, all of that capacity we have in Arlington has outstripped supply. So what you saw when you had people signed up for vaccination appointments with Virginia Hospital Center, that was VHC as our partner, exercising the capacity that they had, getting people enrolled, getting them ready and signed up. What happened was then we got stopped short when the state said, not only do we have less supply than we thought, we don't even have enough supply to get it to you as hospitals. It's only going to the health districts. And that's what we're trying to kind of clean up on. But the important thing about the MOU is that it locks in that capacity, right? And when we add that to what we know the Department of Health and our team within Arlington County government has in terms of our capacity, once the supply is there, we are going to be set to do as many as 14,000 doses, vaccinations in Arlington every week. Right now, the supply of the vaccine, not nearly there, but the capacity is ready to roll, and the MOU helped formalize that.
So we have lots of people just standing by, ready to go as soon as we get that supply in-house. And I guess we should note that Arlington is not unique in this situation, that this is happening throughout Northern Virginia and throughout the entire Commonwealth, because of the extremely limited supply.
Sure, and I know we both want to speak to that. Yesterday, the governor indicated a slight increase for next week from 110,000 to statewide to 130,000. So there is hope. In addition to us having the staff capacity to do more vaccines, there is hope, but this moment is a difficult one because, if your mother or grandmother or grandfather is in need of a dose and had a scheduled appointment, it's very anxiety producing. We both, the whole board and the whole county staff gets that, and we feel the urgency. But along with that urgency, we ask you just to be aware we have a new president and the governor has indicated a slight increase. We're hoping there will be more of an increase in available supply, and we're working to set up the systems so that we can get those out as fast as possible. So we got more to do for sure, and we know it's a tough moment, but we're working and we will get there to a better number of doses step by step. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but over the coming weeks and month or month and a half, I'm confident we're going to continue to grow the number of doses that go into people's arms.
I think it's on to that note. In the meantime, while people are eagerly waiting for their group to come up in line, so to speak, for vaccine scheduling, how can Arlingtonians learn more about when and how they can get vaccinated here?
That's a great question. And that is the number one question that everyone has. When will I be eligible to be vaccinated? When can I make an appointment? The best place to learn more is to visit our county's website, arlingtonva.us. You'll see a banner across the top that takes you straight to our vaccination webpage. And on that webpage, the first thing you'll see is a graphic. You can picture the DMV. They tell you what number they're currently serving, what number's next. Very similar. Here's who's currently getting booked for appointments. Here's who can pre-register, because actually it helps us to know who you are, to know that you're out there. If you might be in 1C, for example, we're not serving you now, but if you share with us your name, the fact that you want to be vaccinated, your contact information, it's going to help us get to you faster by the time we get to 1C, which will probably be later in the spring, as well as groups that are not yet being served at all, right? So that web page, that graphic is helpful. There's also a ton of frequently asked questions on that web page. So if you are in that category of somebody who unfortunately had a canceled appointment with VHC, you're waiting for your call from the county, you want to know when you can expect it, that frequently asked questions site is a great resource for you. It's also a great place to learn information about what the vaccine is, how we know it's safe, how it was tested. And that gets to one other thing that I wanted to make sure we talked about. Although Arlington, I absolutely believe the survey data that suggests we are the most vaccine eager community in America. I think we've all been feeling that from conversations we've been having. There are still members of our community who experience very real skepticism towards vaccination, and that is often because of the history of medical exclusion, or worse, that people of color in particular, that people without documents have experienced in this nation. And so one of the things that's really important to us is getting the word out to vulnerable communities who may be vaccine skeptical. We know the website is not going to be an option for folks who maybe are not or struggling with connectivity issues, or who aren't comfortable with English. And so our complete count committee, I know you remember them from county board wrap-ups last year, Kara, that worked on getting a complete census count, has been converted into the complete vaccination committee. And so that includes dozens of individuals who are at root trusted advisors within some of our most vulnerable communities in Arlington. They're helping get the word out, doing geographic-based activities, working with other institutions, be they faith communities, PTAs, and so forth, to get the word out about what the vaccine is, information about when it's being distributed, yes, but also, again, how we know it's safe and why people are taking it themselves, because sometimes that's the most important message we can extend to.
Okay, well, of course, this is going to be a very fluid situation, probably throughout the spring, summer, perhaps beyond. So I thank you both for your thoughts on the vaccine. And of course, that will be a continuing topic as we move forward. And of course, with the new board, there are other priorities and goals for the board members this year. And we're going to talk a little more about those when we come right back. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and with me today are County Board Chair Matt DeFerranti and Vice Chair Katie Crystal. Of course, with the new year comes new board priorities, and as we discussed, the vaccine has dominated conversations, but of course we have a whole year to plan. Matt, in addition to the vaccine items we discussed, what are some of your big priorities for the new year?
Sure. So I'm glad that you framed your question with vaccines, because that is still has to be the top priority. I feel like it should be priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for this moment, but the year will go on. And so other priorities for me are really about how we help those most in need in our community. With respect to vaccine, that's getting health to those most in need, but eviction prevention, keeping people in their homes when they are struggling to afford rent is a big priority. And hunger. We know we are seeing a significant increase in the number of Arlingtonians who are food insecure at risk of hunger, from about 10,000 or so up to about over 20,000. And so that increase we need to be thinking of. That's a priority, and we will be working on managers' food insecurity working group that will help to enable the county as a whole to work on those issues and support some of our PTAs and AFAC, all who have done a lot on this issue. So those are two. There's also, of course, a solid budget that reflects our community's values and priorities. And a couple of other ones that I'll just mention briefly. There's a community energy plan that's coming. That will be later in the year. That's an important priority. And then what I concluded and what we all share is building systems of racial equity, building our community government and our full community to be committed towards racial equity has to remain a priority, and we have to make progress on that. So those are a few. Clearly, I have a lot of ideas. We as a board have a lot of ideas, but for right now, we also have to stay focused on COVID response.
Of course, and that kind of leads me to, in addition to the pandemic, the vaccine, of course, which have caused so many of those issues you discussed, the food insecurity, the housing issues. As chair, coming into this, what promises to be kind of a challenging year, not just for you as chair, but for the county, what are some of the things that keep you up at night?
Well, it's a great question. And truly right now, every night it's thinking about how can we share what we know and be about the vaccine distribution and help relieve some of the unknowns and anxieties as we reschedule folks, and as we try to serve folks the best. That's really the issue that has dominated these first few weeks and first month, and that's what keeps me up at night, is how do we make sure we're doing all we can? How do we as board members communicate that and partner well with our staff leadership, our public health director, Dr. Varghese, our county manager, Mr. Schwartz, so that we all are making sure we get the information out there and help alleviate some of the concerns and get as much vaccine as we possibly can. That's really the thing that keeps me up. I'm sure that all board members probably have issues that keep them up. And Katie, having been chair, you know the feeling of the particular focus that being chair takes, but there must be issues that you keep thinking of these weeks.
Yeah, that's right, I think. And I hope we don't, and I think about this nationally as well as here in Arlington, that we don't miss what could be a generational opportunity to rethink how we want to order our lives and our community and ourselves. I mean, this pandemic has challenged everything, from how we work to how we interact with each other to what our priorities are, and how willing we are to look at some of the systems of oppression, be they economic or race-based or otherwise, that have actually long characterized our society. When I think about what keeps me up at night, actually even putting aside the pandemic, because I think Matt did a great job of describing why we're not sleeping, right? Because we're literally trying to answer as many questions as we can about when people will get their vaccines with the information we've got. But you know, we are faced with some pretty existential questions, whether it's the climate crisis or the issues of housing affordability, and whether that will Arlington can continue to be a place where middle class people can put down roots and live, or whether we are going to finally contend with the histories of racial exclusion in our own community. These are all so urgent. And at the same time, the solutions have to be systemic, you know, and so Samia, our deputy or our chief equity officer, talks about this a lot, right? That the systems of racial oppression that we see in this nation and here in Arlington County took 4 centuries to put into place, right? They are going to take some time to undo. At the same time, the urgency is enormous when you see, you know, as a result, for example, from the survey data we got from the Dialogues on Race and Equity about how much racism Arlingtonians report experiencing in their daily lives now in this community. Similar on climate, we don't have time actually to act with anything other than all the speed we can muster. And yet the solutions of completely transitioning our county fleet, seeing the turnover in buildings to net zero, or you know, as total energy efficiency as possible. These things are big and structural and take time. I think on the point of housing, we see middle-class Arlingtonians leaving the county every day because they can't afford to put down roots here. And yet our zoning ordinance and the sort of patterns of exclusion encoded in how we use our residential land and zone our residential land, those took generations to build up and are going to take a little time to undo. So I just think about that tension of the tremendous urgency of our problems and the urgency with which people are looking to county government to make progress on the one hand, and the amount of time that truly systemic and lasting change will take on the other. And well, you can see why I'm not sleeping especially well.
Yeah.
But despite that, as we look ahead to some of these outstanding issues that affect all of us on a daily basis, but that the pandemic, since that's kind of right in front of our faces, that seems to have dominated the discussions. Are you hopeful as we go into a new year that some of those conversations can take place and that the path for change can be on its way?
Well, at least I am hopeful. I think that we're seeing changes in the community as a whole and how we can get more people involved through virtual meetings like so many that we're holding. So I'm hopeful on that front. I also think, you know, a little reported on issue that we have seen is that over these first few weeks is one of our partners, Amazon, helped invest $381 million in affordable housing. And, you know, it was in the midst of responding to vaccines, so it barely got reported, and that's fine and reasonable. But it's an indication that I think as a community, we're taking seriously the need to commit to a more equitable place to live, a place where we strengthen and bring more people into to the table and into the conversations. And I think that's very important. I also do think I'm hopeful because of sometimes you'll see someone who has posted yet again or talked yet again about ordering from a local restaurant. You see those sorts of things, and we have talked about a lot of priorities. I'm hopeful because I think that our economic recovery potential is strong. It's just that at this moment we have to stabilize before we can recover. So I think there are a number of signs for hopefulness, and I also am mindful of how difficult this moment is for many of us. And I'm hoping, Katie, that you bring hopefulness as well, so to speak.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, listen, my greatest worry is in some ways also my greatest hope, which is to say we can't achieve any of this. And in fact, we can't get through the pandemic unless we do it together. And certainly the risk of a moment that is so characterized by scarcity with the vaccine runs the risk of pitting people against one another, groups against one another, neighbors against one another. That is our greatest risk right now, overarching all of those priorities. But I also know, exactly as Matt said, we have seen this pandemic bring forward people's capacity to band together, to think selflessly, whether that is the volunteer PTA groups that are still running food banks every week at our elementary schools around the county and middle schools around the county, whether it is neighbors supporting small businesses and small businesses in turn supporting neighbors, right, as we've seen chefs and restaurant owners step up across the county to do, arts groups supporting one another. I think that spirit of community giving is still really strong. We saw it recently actually on MLK Day and an entirely virtual day of service. And so as long as that thread of community still exists in Arlington County, I think we have a fighting chance to tackle some of these existential issues.
It's very inspiring to see some of the gestures that our community is taking to help each other.
Yeah, I think you asked a great question, Karen. Both of us have hope. I do think we also are pragmatists in the sense that, hope and possibility is a different thing when you're homeschooling because of where we are as far as education, when you're homeschooling two children who are tired of being inside. We as a board and as a community are aware of those challenges. We know that this is such a difficult moment. In many ways, this is the most difficult time that all of us will face in our lives. And so, if we can recognize that challenge and understand that getting schools open is important and it's a divisive, challenging issue, but still keep that hope out there, I think that we'll be in good shape.
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to take another quick break. But when we come back, we're going to discuss another hot topic from this month's board meeting, namely a big redevelopment project in Roslyn. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly look at the actions the board took at its monthly meeting. Now, while, as we've been saying, the vaccine has dominated the lion's share of conversations this month, we did have a rather robust discussion surrounding a big Roslyn redevelopment plan, the Ames Center. Let's start off, let's remind viewers what this site is and then what was brought forth to the board this month. Matt, we'll start with you.
Sure. So the project is actually, as you're approaching Roslyn, there's a church that has a gasoline station underneath, if for some who don't live in Roslyn. But it's a key piece of Roslyn's neighborhood. And this project is going to result in additional housing units, a total of 740. And it's going to replace and help us build out some of our plans that we had for Roslyn as a sector. And so this is a project that 18th Street will help us provide a view down into Roslyn, and it's going to be two buildings next to each other. It helps us with a significant investment in our transportation infrastructure, and it's the sort of economic development that I think will help us recover as a community. And so it was a great project that came forward. The investment in transportation is key. It's also as far as rebuilding the sort of revitalizing the walkability of Roslyn. So it's a good project in that way. There's a number of other components to it that Katie, you may want to share as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, while we're talking expansively today in this county board wrap up, one of the things I think is pretty remarkable about these civic engagement processes to do these corridor area plans. It's just the capacity that the community and our professional planners and the private sector brings to looking at what is, right? The tall buildings of Roslyn and the way the street grid is laid out, and being able to just envision something completely different. And that's what the 18th Street, the rebuilt 18th Street that is the heart of the Realize Roslyn Sector Plan is all about. It's this new spine where currently, you sort of have some buildings configuring and some streets envisioning a new spine that runs through downtown Roslyn, a corridor with open spaces, a view shed that is walkable and bikeable, has streets that invite people in, and really a new vision for the whole downtown. And this project goes such a long way in delivering that. So I'm really excited. It's being able to look at what currently is and recognizing something even better could be. And this is going to be a project that delivers it. The other thing to be really excited about, 24 on-site committed affordable apartment units. That's really hard to do in these very expensive, very downtown sites. Often what the builder or the applicant will do instead is contribute to our affordable housing investment fund, which our affordable housing ordinance allows them to do. But so to get these on site, to bring neighbors maybe making 60 or 70% of the area median income right side by side with neighbors spending quite a bit more on luxury housing. That's really a vision for an integrated community by income, and that's exciting to see.
Well, it's interesting, Katie, you bring that up, because I was going to say that there was a lot of discussion about some really interesting elements of this project. And we were talking for several hours during the meeting of everything from the public art component to the elevators for the building to the really unique plantings that are proposed. Can you talk about some of the things that are going to make this project unique and such a catalyst for this new 18th Street corridor?
Well, to start, I think the original plans that this developer brought to us did not value that 18th Street. So it's 2 towers instead of 1. And I think that will open things up. That is a significant community benefit. We did talk about planters and public art and biophilic components of this development in a fair bit of detail, but I think that reflected that so much work had been done already to make this a good proposal when it came to us, that there was some additional pieces that we would want. No project is perfect, but we certainly, one of the biggest things that not everyone may know is that Fort Myer Drive and that tunnel is going to go away, and this is a significant investment to get us there. So I think that our processes worked, and as we've talked so expansively about other earlier in our conversation, this is an example of walking and chewing gum. We are doing the blocking and tackle, the things we need to do as a community to continue economic growth, because without that growth, the investments that we want to make in our schools, in our environment, are really challenged. And so that's what I thought was some real strong pieces of this project.
And this will also go a long way to achieving that better balance between the housing and then the retail commercial development that was the envisionment of the sector plan initially, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Yeah, and the sector plan is something I've come to see later, but it's also something that each of us on the board has wanted to see realized. So this is a good project, and we both, I think, were quite pleased to support it. I don't know, Katie, if you have other thoughts.
No, I think that was great. And Kara, as you talked about, each of those examples are illustrative or sort of nuts and bolts features that tie into bigger questions, right? So we had a fairly lengthy conversation about planters along the side of the building, but that's more than just a decorative element, right? That's about how do you create living things in a downtown area that may not have as much natural spaces as other parts of the county, right? How do you bring that in? That's a big concept and a big priority, certainly for residents of our more downtown areas like Roslyn or Crystal City. That conversation about the elevator overrun, which sounded really wonky, was in fact a conversation about the heights map for Roslyn, which is a key element of the sector plan. How do we expect that skyline to ebb and flow so that it's not all just masses of buildings? What do we expect the key view sheds from the observation deck, a landmark feature of Roslyn? How do we expect those to play out? And so on and so forth. So lots of those sort of wonky elements that are actually indicative of something much bigger. The one piece that I think we all would have loved to have seen a little more come in on was the environment, or the sustainability piece, rather, I should say, of the buildings. They are going to be LEED Silver, which is the standard of our former Green Building Incentive Plan, Green Building Incentive Program. As regular watchers of County Board Wrap Up probably know from December, the board actually updated that policy. So from now on, you'll see buildings to achieve their base density having to start at LEED Gold. It's a higher standard for on-site sustainability and other measures. And so I know we're looking forward to seeing more projects come in under that new program to really help us achieve our community's net zero goals.
Okay, well, on that note, that will bring us to the end of another County Board Wrap-Up, the first of 2021. Next month, we'll be speaking to board members after the county manager proposes his fiscal year 2022 budget at February's meeting. We'll have lots of questions about the manager's recommendations and the board's public review of the proposed budget. So Matt and Katie, thank you both very much for joining us today. And thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the board's actions. Remember, you can always visit the county website, arlingtonva.us, for the latest on the pandemic, vaccine efforts, and all of the projects we discussed here today. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell. We hope all of you join us again next month for County Board Wrap Up.